Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Rise Like Lions. I am Kevin,
I'm Dave.
and we are coming to you fresh after the Canadian voters had their say. It's funny, that's something that a colleague of mine always used to say at the institution I teach at, which shall remain nameless for now. But the community college I teach at, and after every election, it's funny, Dave, because he'd always be like, well, the people have spoken. And it was usually to justify whatever bullshit electoral outcome had just transpired.
Right.
And it always used to drive me crazy because it'd be like, is the electorate properly informed? Do we have an actual choice in our society? And to the point today, Dave, what I want to talk about, and I know we're going to have a lot to say about this, folks. This is something Dave and I are both passionate about, is we want to talk about the election that just happened in particular, and not necessarily like the breakdown of which parties, won which amount of seats. So we can talk about that too, but we want to talk about how the actual election was held and how that affected the outcome. And so really what we want to talk about here is our electoral system itself. And is it a fair and good electoral system? So I think what I'll do, Dave, is let me go through some data put out by Fair Vote Canada. They're an amazing national organization, and they take the lead on this issue of electoral reform, and they do such important work. So big shout out to Fair Vote Canada for all the work you do. But let's look at what they put out. So what Fair Vote Canada does every election is they say, well, here's the results you got under our current electoral system, which is known as, in electoral systemese, as a first past the post system. And so what first past the post means is it sort of comes from like horse racing. So the idea that you've got, four horses running around a track, and the first horse to pass the finish line wins the race. The same, if you're watching the 100-meter dash or something like that at the Olympics, that's a first past the post system. And so this is how our elections work in Canada. So on a riding by riding basis all across the country, 338 different electoral districts. Each one has a horse race, and the winner is the person who gets the most votes in that riding. So to a certain extent, this makes sense to people. Well, you got the most votes, you win, right? Well, but if you got to think about it, you could have four people running in one electoral district. Three people get 24% of the vote. One person gets 26% of the vote. Well, they won, right? So under our system, they would win that riding. So say maybe it was a Liberal who got 26% of the vote. That Liberal candidate represents that riding. The Liberals get another seat in the House of Commons. However, think about that, folks. It means that 74% of the votes cast in that district totally didn't matter whatsoever. And that's a huge problem, right? Because basically all of these people are disenfranchised then. And so this is what makes our system so screwy in terms of how it actually plays out. And, that idea of wasted votes happens all across the country. So just to give you an example of what that means in terms of the 2021 election. Now, first of all, there are a couple of seats. There's about, 6-7 seats that are still yet to be decided. They're that close. And I'm hoping that my friends in Orange gain a couple of seats. It seems like they might actually gain about 2 more. But let's go off the numbers right now. And so what the good folks at Fair Vote Canada do is they break down what we actually got. So if you look at, and in this case, they use the popular vote. So on the left here, they have the percentage of popular vote that each party got. So this literally means how many people voted for each party, right? So in orange here, you got the NDP, got 17.7% of the vote. You have the Bloc Québécois got 7.8%. The Conservatives, 33.9%. The Liberals, 32.2%. The People's Party of Canada, depressingly, got 5.1% of the vote. And the Greens got 2.3% of the vote. So what did we actually get in terms of seats in the House of Commons? Well, you're going to see distortions between the popular vote and how many seats we got. And this is because of the distortions of the first past the post system. So the interesting thing is here, the Liberals only got 32% of the popular vote, but they get 46, almost 47% of the seats. So the Liberals get this artificial bump out of our current system. The NDP, on the other hand, the exact opposite effect happens. They get 10% of their support wiped out. 17, almost 18% of the vote, only 7.4% of the seats. The Bloc Québécois is roughly equal. They get a bit of a bump out of this system. So 7.8% of the popular vote, they get 10% of the seats. The Conservatives in this case are fairly even, which is interesting. That isn't always the case when you look at how this plays out. But they do get a bit of a bump. And the Greens get, I think it was 2 seats they ended up winning. But really, with 2.3% of the popular vote, they should have had more seats. And even, the People's Party of Canada, they got no seats, but they got 5% of the popular vote. So, folks, this is where I think we've got to be fair. I think the People's Party of Canada is an atrocious political organization. However, we live in a democracy. Should people who vote for them have their vote respected?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they should, right? And we have to deal with that as a country. That, this is something you said earlier, Dave. I liked how you said that. We've got to deal with the fact that 5% of people voted for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not like they just changed magically overnight or something. This is what they want for now.
Yeah, exactly, right? And we can talk about how to change that, but for now, I mean, what people's political will basically is what should be represented. And so what Fair Vote Canada is talking about in terms of our electoral system is, that, first of all, that the results are often inequitable in the sense that the real political will of the people is not reflected. And so they argue for what's known as a proportional representation system. And it's exactly what it sounds like. At the end of the day, when you do your election, if Party A gets 30% of the votes, they get 30% of the seats. Right. Party B, it makes sense. It almost makes too much sense, eh?
No, really. Yeah.
Yeah, Party B gets 40% of the votes, they get 40% of the seats, And so what tends to happen under proportional systems is you get more minority governments, you get more coalition governments. Yeah. You get governments where there has to be real politics that takes place.
You get more democratic governments.
You do, exactly. Yeah. If you're right. If you're at all interested in democracy, if that's something, a value that you claim to uphold.
Other democracies, other than the U.S., major democracies, that is the way it goes. Technically, too, we can have some part of that. There could be coalitions. It's just that, we're close to the U.S. and, it's like Jupiter and we're a little moon. So we're affected by that. But
definitely. And also, I think it's it's a fair way to run elections. And one of the other things that, you mentioned other countries. Fair Vote Canada, and this is where they're so useful, is they point out it's actually over 90 democracies in the world today vote using a proportional system. And as far as I'm aware, unless anything's changed recently, there's still just 4 that use this antiquated first past the post system. There's Canada, the United States, Britain, and Australia. Right. And so everyone else seems to have caught on to this, except these 4 recalcitrant countries.
It's not new. It was thought of before the first one, got past their monarchies and started having a representational system. It was already there, fully formed.
Exactly. So you're right. It's been around for decades in many countries. Works just fine. And so, one of the other things that proportional representation addresses is the issue that, in a lot of countries, there is a bit of a crisis in voter turnout. So people aren't going to the polls as much as you'd like them to, people who are eligible to vote. And I know we've talked about this when we did our election breakdown. We're clear where we stand on this whole idea, right? I totally get it. If you don't think electoral politics is where you want to spend all of your time and energy, fair enough. But still vote, right? I think that's
It doesn't take much.
It does. It really doesn't. And it is, contrary to anyone who would argue otherwise, it is a lever for creating some change, right? And at times it's been a lever for creating massive change. Other times it's incremental. We get it. It's frustrating, right? But one of the things about our current system is, it discourages people. Like, so say maybe you really are an NDP or a Green Party supporter, but you're like, well, the guy or the woman in my riding is never going to win. So why vote? Like, why even do it, right? And it is discouraging. And it also encourages strategic voting, which is this really crappy thing where you're like, well, I really want to vote NDP, let's say, but I really don't want the Conservative to win, so I better vote for the Liberal because he's got a better chance of beating the Conservative, right? Like this happens over and over again. Yeah, it's frustrating. And so for all these reasons, Fair Vote Canada, I think, has it right that we need to move to a proportional system. And I just want to point out too, Dave, and I like it. There's also like they do this kind of every single time we vote. So just so you know, folks, this isn't something that just happens the odd time. It happens over and over again. Yes. So in 2019, you had the same essential situation, right? You have the Green Party. At this time, the Green Party did really well in terms of the popular vote. 6.5% of the popular vote. They get 1% of the seats. They get completely screwed. The Liberals only get 33% of the vote, but they get 46% of the seats. Again, the Conservatives get a bit of a bump. NDP once more gets screwed. They get 16% of the votes, 16% of the votes, only 7% of the seats. So you continually get these distortions, and it really it skews our democracy basically. And the other thing I'll point out too, because people might be sort of saying like, oh, well, why does the Bloc? So here the Bloc gets 7.7% of the popular votes, but 9% of the seats. Mm-hmm. And the reason they do that is because the first past the post system rewards a party if they have geographically concentrated support. And it kind of makes sense. If you have all of your supporters in one small area, you're going to win a lot more horse races than if you have a lot of support totally spread out. Right. It means you're going to come close in a whole bunch of horse races, but in our system, close doesn't matter, right?
Right.
Close means you're SOL, right?
Yeah.
So that's another unfortunate thing. And so again, a party like the NDP, for instance, I mean, this is a party that I support. I'm going to be real about that. They have a lot of support. If you think about it, they get close some years to 20% of the people across the country, but their support tends to be a little more spread out. And so that doesn't translate into seats. Same for the Greens. It happens to them all the time. Yeah. So this is something that, folks, as an issue, we talked about, I know when Dave and I did the breakdown of the Liberal Party platform, we talked about really, I think, one of the, to me, unforgivable sins that Justin Trudeau has committed in his political life was promising that we were going to move from first past the post to proportional representation.
Yeah, like clockwork every so often. Every couple decades, that's promised since the beginning.
It's promised, and then it's quickly forgotten, right? As soon as the Liberals won a majority, and they won that majority in 2015 in an incredibly disproportional election result as well, where the Liberals only had in the 30% of the popular vote, but they got like 180 seats or something. It was incredible. So this is the problem we face in Canada today, folks, is the big parties benefit from the current unfair system. The Liberals benefit from the current unfair system. So do the Conservatives. I mean, the Bloc does too, but to their credit, they have actually endorsed proportional representation too. I think they have some baseline level of integrity, which is good to see. Clearly, the Green Party supports it. Clearly, the NDP supports it. People's Party of Canada, I just don't think they have their act together enough to even understand this whole thing and why important
I have seen positive reactions from someone with it, but I think that's not consistent.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. That's data I don't have. But so this is where we're at right now, folks, where we had Justin Trudeau promise it, and more than that, we actually already had a commission, a federal government commission, look into our voting system. And it looked at all the voting systems around the world, and it basically said, our system kind of sucks, and we should change to a proportional system. Now, this is where it can get a little complicated to folks, because there are different kinds of systems of proportional representation. You can get at a proportional result from a few different ways. So, the system we settled on was called mixed member proportional. I don't think it's maybe a good idea to get into the weeds of it in this video. We'll do another video where we can break down.
For sure. Yeah. A little series, break down each one.
And we'll get into the weeds then, and that's cool. Yeah. But the whole thing to understand is basically, folks, the government struck this broad-based citizens panel to look into our electoral system. They clearly said the system sucks. They clearly said we need to move to a proportional system. And then the Liberals abandoned it, right? And the Conservatives have never been for it. So this is one of these situations where we do have to, as citizens, if you really believe in democracy in Canada, please educate yourself about this deep flaw in our voting system, the first past the post system. Educate yourself about proportional representation. We'll do our part, in subsequent videos to talk about it and to try and help answer some questions that people might have. And I would highly encourage you to, and I'm going to put a link in the description of this video to Fair Vote Canada. Become a member of Fair Vote Canada. I am. It doesn't take a lot. You get a couple emails every once in a while. It's not that onerous.
No, not much.
Yeah, but they keep you up to date on this issue because we have to push very, very hard for this issue, folks. Like I said, if you do believe in democracy, because think about it, there is a diversity of political opinion in our country that is simply never heard. And it's not the fact that the majority of us want to keep tacking back and forth between liberal and conservative over and over again. That's a complete lie if you look at how people actually vote.
What I didn't really fully pay attention to before, and it didn't even come from seeing things from Fair Vote. While I was watching this, while I was punishing myself for something, staying up to an incredibly late hour watching it.
Yeah.
But on fun Twitch streams, so it's much better now because of that. But
Nice.
I'm watching all of these ones coming from Nova Scotia and stuff like that and out west. And they've got these ridings where a dozen people can decide almost the whole thing of preposterously small amounts of people.
Yeah.
And a lot of other rural-like areas. And then like in something like my area here in Hamilton, we have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of us, like where it's like just the PPC vote, the smallest, was much bigger than the whole population of so many of those ridings. Like, even if that was fixed, we might be doing a little better, be a little more representational, even without proportions or anything else, but
Yeah.
there just is no real will to do it. It's a talking point once in a while to get enough votes to get your majority so you can just get on with things.
Yeah, and it is in Dave, sorry, I was just going to say in Dave.
Yeah.
Dave, in so many ways is what I was going to get
Yes.
at. It reflects a standard problem we face in that the current system benefits the current folks with power and privilege, right? And so the current electoral system is the same way. It benefits the two big parties, right? Yeah. And so that is something that, it is what it is. We've got to push against it. But there are some good signs, I'll just say maybe before leaving off, folks, that more and more people are supporting proportional representation when they understand it, when they actually have it broken down and they think through it. Yeah, they realize, this is stupid the way we do our elections normally in Canada. Yes, we need to change. So I think it is hopeful, and yet we all have to keep pushing. So, when you're in your conversations, and again, to liberal and conservative supporters who may hear this, it sounds like we're trashing your parties, maybe in ways we are, but we know there's people of good faith and there's people who care about their country who vote, conservative and liberal. So please, think about this issue and think about, is it enough just that your party wins all the time if our country is not very democratic? I mean, think about it. Like, would you like a dictatorship? Probably not. So, I think democracy is a value we can all get behind. And even if it means that your party may have to work with other parties a little bit more, you know what? If that's the price to pay for more democracy and more people actually having their voice heard, I don't think that's too big of a price.
No, I mean, that's a scary prospect for all of us, but also it's a very hopeful prospect.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
for sure. Well, listen, folks, thank you very much for checking out this video on proportional representation. Again, we will do videos coming up in the future where we look at more of the details, but for now, we just wanted to get the word out and let folks know. So as always, folks, if you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing to our channel, giving us a like, giving the video a share. We would appreciate it very, very much.
Very much.
So take care, and we'll see you next episode.
Thanks.